Here's a tune that any child can sing. Da-da-da-da. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You can't go wrong.
One of these lovely ladies is my voice teacher. Can you guess which one? Here, I'll let you watch a little bit more.
Our producer thinks it's such a shame that we have never met by name. And so, after approximately 1,000,000 shows, here goes Gene Lowell, Ed Lindstrom, John Anderson, Gene Steck, Jerry DeWayne, Barbara Nelson, Fran Carroll, Ray Whitney.
Yep, that's my voice teacher, Carmen Baron, otherwise known as Peggy Powers. I had no idea that she had this entire career under her belt until I sat down with her and asked her about it. So let's start at the beginning. She was born in Macon, Georgia. Actually, let her tell you herself.
I was born in Macon, Georgia. My mother's people were Southerners from the 1600s on. In Georgia was where most of them lived in Georgia, but then we moved down to Florida. My father came from Peru, came in on a Chinese boat. He did from Peru to California, and he found his way down south, and he had gone to school. Came here to go to school. My father came to this country. And it was kind of sad because he was the only Latino in West Palm Beach at the time. I never knew his family. He had one sister who visited us, but she didn't speak English. And I was a teenager, I couldn't speak Spanish. It was really sad that happens. But my mother tried very, very hard to learn Spanish, and it was not a success. He was a linguist. And he got a job at Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. My mother was going to school there too. She was a musician, and she was majoring in violin at Wesleyan Conservatory. And they met and eloped. My mother's family did not know this, and it worked out, And then I was born there, my sister was born in Macon, and my father then got a job at a university called Bryan University, which is where the Scopes trial happened. And he stayed there 1 year, and then they got in the car and drove to West Palm Beach, Florida, because there was a job for my father at the university and at the high school. That's how they came about, and finally the family accepted my father. It was a time that I do have to say it was very unusual for a Peruvian to be married to a Southern woman. My sister and I were considered the Spanish girls. We looked a little bit different. We didn't look like our cousins. I felt different. I wanted to have, while at a certain point of my growing up, I didn't want high cheekbones, and I wanted to look like my cousins. But then when I came to New York and discovered my life, I didn't want to look like my cousins.
When you were younger, was it like your mom, the fact that she was a musician, that influenced you to want to be involved in music?
She put a violin under my chin when I was 4. And I just knew that's what I had to do, something in music. My sister, no. She gave her cello and no, she didn't want that, but I did. And she was a big influence in my life with music. It was very, very important to her. And we had a family string quartet, yes. She let me play first violin, gave my father violin lessons when they were courting, and he really wasn't bad. He had a vibrato, which was interesting. And then my sister played the cello, and we used to perform, in West Palm Beach, where we lived, as a family string quartet, which was kind of nice. And then I graduated from high school, and they sent me to a college in Miami to spend 1 year because my dream was to go to Juilliard. The next year, I got on a train by myself and came to New York City. and auditioned, and I got in, but I changed my major to voice. And then I decided that I had to stay up here. This is where I needed to be, so I did.
When you first traveled to the city to pursue your dream, was it like scary? Were you like,
Oh, yes. First of all, there was culture shock. In the South, if you were shopping, you would talk with a salesperson and talk about the weather, and everybody was very charming. But in New York City, and it really upset me. It took me a while, but I loved it. And Juilliard was culture shock because I was one of the best in my little small towns, and I arrived in New York and there were all these people who were so much better than I was. One year, when I first came to Juilliard, I was told about an audition that they were looking for a high soprano who could read music. So I auditioned and I got a show. And it was called Hollywood Hotel. Years ago, it was in the beginning, and that was the beginning of my career. So I became what they call a studio singer.
were there any auditions that you went to that you thought you did well and you didn't get it?
Oh yes, it was for the genre that maybe I didn't belong in. They needed an Italian-looking singer. And she had to have a high voice, and you have only 16 bars, as you know. And so I decided I would do the Italian street song, which had a high C. So I figured I'd come out and I'd sing the high C, and that would be wonderful. And I did, and then a deep voice came from the audience, next! And that was it. The other auditions worked because it was something I was, I think, a little better at.
So, what was the main genre that you stuck to?
Television and recordings. Very few singers at that time could sight sing. And it was like if they needed you for a recording, you had to be able to read the music and record immediately. And we were able to do that. So we were called for all sorts of recording sessions. We did television because television was also in its infancy. And this is kind of interesting. You really had to look like you were either Irish or English. And I was in the business. I was accepted in the business, except they took great pains to bring down my cheekbones. It was very interesting. I didn't feel bad about it. And then they gave me a name. My name was Carmen Montoya. And they gave me the name of Peggy Powers, which felt kind of strange, but after a while, it worked. I kept recording. I had some lucky things happen. I sang a duet with Andy Williams, and it became a hit, and they put my name on the recording.
How was it like working with Andy Williams and to have a big duet with him?
It was good.
Yeah.
There were a lot of singers in those days, recording and doing well. And when you're a studio singer, you have to sing certain rhythms in the background while they're recording. And yet we never knew what that many of the singers were going to do. We just have to watch them and go with them. But with Andy was such a good musician. He was a good musician. It was so easy, so easy. It was a business. We all got there, we got the music and went through it once and recorded. Whoever the singer was. I did work with a lot of singers who were really good. Yes, I worked with Ella Fitzgerald, Della Reese, Dee Dee Warwick, Connie Francis, Paul Anka. So from then on, I got to do jingles. I signed a contract with Coral Records and did a song. And that was kind of a bust. It didn't sell that well. But that's what I went on doing for years. And then toward the end, there were 8 of us singers who were recording. And we formed an octet. And we did concerts. We did the Library of Congress and all of that. And then as years passed, I started doing a lot of children's records. That's about it. Then I started teaching. I was still singing somewhat, but it was my part of the career was dying. And then I taught violin for a while, and then someone sent me a voice student, and then I just started teaching, and here I am, teaching you.
How long have you been teaching voice or violin?
forever. I guess I've been teaching voice maybe 20 years. Violin I taught for about 5 years, and I preferred teaching voice. I like it much better.
Besides one of your TV shows, Hotel Hollywood, what other shows did you?
Well, I did a show called The Firestone Hour. We were an octet, and this is where they had operatic singers come. It was classical. The NBC Symphony had all the best musicians, and that was good. That lasted for a couple of years. And I did other shows. I did a Pat Boone show. I did a few other different shows. The show that I loved the most and was proudest of was the Hit Parade, because we had to dance and we had to do a lot of things. They really overpaid us, but we had to take dance class. They were treating us also like dancers. And that show lasted, I was there 4 years. Yeah, that was good. I was proud of it. You know, I have some things that I was very proud of. Andy, but also classical stuff. I used to do obligatos, high obligatos, because I was a high soprano. And I was proud of that. Did jingles, did a lot of jingles. And that paid a lot of money.
Are there any jingles that we would recognize now?
I don't think so. I did a Tide, I did a Palmolive, I did, I don't think you would. It was many years ago. But yes, that was a good business. That's changed. Madison Avenue even fought our union. A lot of things changed.
What was it like to be in a union?
Good question. When I first did my first television show, Hollywood Hotel, they would call us in at 6 o'clock in the morning and keep us until 10 o'clock at night. And we were paid very little. But the reason the union did not cover us at that time was that television was so new. And AFTRA, of course, covered recordings, but here is this new thing. So as soon as the union came in, it became workable. We got better money. They didn't have us there at 6 o'clock in the morning and keeping us till 10 because they had to pay us. It became fair. Yeah, that was good. There was another thing that's interesting in the studio work that we did. I was mostly Caucasian, and just about everybody was very Caucasian. And one Sunday we were doing two sides with Della Reese, and she looked at our group and she said, "Why aren't there any black singers there?" I got a phone call about a couple of weeks later to do a recording for Malcolm Dodd's. And when I got to the recording to do it, there were black singers, and I was part of it. It was the beginning of black singers coming in, and it was easy. It was one of the smoothest because they were so good. Yeah, that was important, and it ended up well.
How do you keep yourself entertained these days besides your teaching?
I have a lot of friends, many, and we meet for dinner. And I love theater. I go to theater in the city, and I love it. And I'm doing it more and more now. And I love teaching. I do a lot of teaching. It's funny, we all have passion that we get comfortable with. I find with myself is that if I'm tired or if I'm on edge, which we all get, if I go downstairs to my studio and I even practice, I'm not a pianist, but I have to practice accompanying people, I feel good. I really do. I feel good.
You can't go wrong. Go feel our soul on the radio. A silly song.